I was on air when my world collapsed. 5 million viewers watched me smile brilliantly into camera one while reading the prompter about Richmond's annual flower festival. Completely unaware that my producer was simultaneously sliding a pink termination notice under my dressing room door. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Spread beauty wherever you go," I chirped to my audience, the studio lights hot against my makeup-caked skin, while my career quietly died just 30 feet away. 2 hours later, I found myself wandering aimlessly down Carey Street, my blonde hair freed from its professional updo, the termination notice crumpled in my Prada handbag. 3 years as Richmond's most beloved morning show host, gone because ratings had slipped 2 points. The network wanted someone younger, someone with fresher appeal. At 32, apparently I was already television's equivalent of sour milk. The gentle tapping of rain against storefronts should have sent me scurrying for cover, but I welcomed it. Let it wash away the studio makeup. Let it blur my vision so I didn't have to see the promotional posters with my face still plastered across downtown. The droplets traced cold paths down my neck, sneaking beneath my collar as I ducked into the first open doorway I found. The smell hit me first, wood polish mixed with something metallic and ancient. Dim yellow lighting revealed glass display cases filled with vintage cameras, their brass fittings gleaming like forgotten treasure. Timeless Captures read a small wooden sign behind the counter. I'd passed this place 100 times but never noticed it before. "They're beautiful, aren't they?" a voice said from somewhere behind the displays. "Like little time machines." I jumped slightly, my wet heels squeaking against the hardwood floor. The shop had seemed empty, the only sound the ticking of an ancient wall clock and the rain drumming against the windows. I peered around a tall shelf and spotted a splash of copper red, a woman with her back to me, kneeling to retrieve something from a bottom shelf. "Sorry, didn't mean to startle you," she said, rising and turning toward me. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, tendrils escaping to frame a face with the kind of naturally flushed cheeks that makeup artists spent hours trying to replicate. She wore waitress blacks, crisp white shirt, narrow black tie loosened at the neck, black pants, probably on her break from one of the nearby restaurants. "Just browsing?" I murmured, suddenly conscious of my expensive rain-soaked outfit and smeared mascara. My fingers instinctively moved to wipe beneath my eyes. "You're Ivy Powell," she stated simply, no trace of the usual fawning excitement people showed when recognizing me from television. "Your segment on historical preservation saved the Thompson building last year." Before I could respond, we both reached for the same camera, a vintage Rolleiflex with twin lenses like watchful eyes. Our fingers brushed against the worn leather, and I felt a small jolt that had nothing to do with static electricity. Her hand was warm despite the chill rain outside, her fingernails short and practical with chipped blue polish. "You know cameras?" I asked, withdrawing my hand perhaps a beat too slowly. "I know enough that I've been saving for this model for 6 months. Her smile had a crooked quality, higher on the right side. 3 more paychecks to go. I lifted the camera gently, feeling its substantial weight. Through its viewfinder, the shop transformed into a miniature world of brass and shadows. When I lowered it, she was watching me with curious blue eyes that seemed to see past my public persona. "I just lost my job," I blurted out, the words escaping before I could trap them behind my media-trained smile. 3 years building that morning show, and they handed me a pink slip during the damned flower festival segment. The redhead didn't offer empty platitudes or awkward sympathy. Instead, she reached for an old Polaroid camera on a nearby shelf, aimed it at me, and clicked the shutter. The flash momentarily blinded me, the mechanical whir of the developing photo oddly comforting. "What are you doing?" I asked, blinking away the afterimage of the flash. "Capturing the moment," she said, gently waving the developing photo. "Day 1 of whatever comes next." She handed me the still developing image and extended her other hand. "I'm Gwendolyn Harris, by the way, and I know exactly what you need right now." What I didn't know then, as I stared at my rain-streaked face slowly materializing on that Polaroid, was that the camera she coveted would soon capture our lives becoming hopelessly entangled, and that the woman before me would eventually risk everything to save me from the mistake I was about to make. "Exactly what I need," I repeated skeptically, "which is dinner," Gwendolyn replied, pocketing the Polaroid she'd taken of me. "My shift at Orlando's ends in 20 minutes. Their kitchen stays open late, and I know the chef. You look like you could use both food and alcohol, possibly in reverse order." My television-honed instincts should have sent me running. Newly unemployed media personalities don't typically go dining with strangers, especially not beautiful strangers with perceptive eyes and camera obsessions. Yet something about the way she offered, casual, without a hint of the starstruck enthusiasm I usually encountered, felt refreshingly genuine. "I shouldn't," I said automatically, even as I found myself adding, "but I will." 90 minutes later, I sat across from Gwendolyn at a corner table in Orlando's, an upscale Italian place I'd featured on my show last year. The staff kept shooting curious glances our way, clearly wondering why their colleague was dining with the local celebrity whose career had just publicly imploded. The news of my firing had already hit social media. "So how does someone who serves pasta afford vintage cameras?" I asked, sipping a glass of red wine that had appeared without me ordering it. Gwendolyn's fingers traced the condensation on her water glass. "The same way most artists survive: multiple jobs, minimal sleep, and pathological optimism. I waitress here 5 nights, do photography gigs on weekends, and have a small darkroom in my bathroom." "Your bathroom?" "It's the only room without windows." She shrugged. "My shower curtain doubles as a darkroom curtain. Very efficient." I laughed for what felt like the first time in days, the tension in my shoulders momentarily easing. A nearby table of businessmen glanced over, recognizing me. I automatically straightened my posture and arranged my features into my camera-ready smile. Gwendolyn noticed. "You don't have to do that, you know." "Do what?" "The thing with your face. The TV personality switching on." She tilted her head, studying me with unnerving directness. "Must be exhausting. Being on all the time." I stared at her, caught between offense and a strange sense of relief at being seen through so easily. The waiter arrived with plates of pasta I hadn't ordered, momentarily saving me from responding. "Penne arrabbiata," Gwendolyn announced. "The chef makes it extra spicy for me. Figured you might need something with a kick today." The first bite sent a pleasant burn through my mouth. "It's perfect," I admitted, though I usually avoid carbs during the week. "Former habit," she corrected gently. "You're a civilian now. You can eat whatever the hell you want." I found myself telling her things I hadn't shared with anyone: my fears about being washed up at 32, the panic of losing my identity, the apartment I could no longer afford on East Grace Street. Her blue eyes never wavered from mine, occasionally crinkling at the corners when I made self-deprecating jokes about my situation. "What about you?" I finally asked. "What's your story?" Her expression shifted subtly. "Currently starring in the classic tale called Talented but Broke Artist Supports Sick Parent While Pursuing Impossible Dreams." She twirled pasta around her fork with practiced precision. "Not exactly original screenplay material." "Sick parent?" "Mom. Lymphoma. Insurance covers the basics, but the experimental treatment that's actually working." She shook her head. "Let's just say I'm not buying that Rolleiflex anytime soon." The restaurant had emptied around us, waitstaff giving us space but clearly wanting to close. Outside, Richmond's historic streets glistened under streetlights, the rain having stopped hours ago. Gwendolyn insisted on walking me to my car, our footsteps echoing on the cobblestones. "I never do this," I admitted, as we strolled along the damp sidewalk. "What? Get fired and dine with waitresses?" "Talk to strangers. Real talking, not interview talking." Her laugh was soft in the night air. "Then I'm honored to be the exception." We paused beneath a wrought iron lamppost that cast a golden glow over her red hair. In that light, away from the restaurant and curious eyes, something shifted between us. The conversation that had flowed so easily over dinner suddenly hung suspended, replaced by an awareness that made my pulse quicken. "Thank you," I said, my voice lower than I intended. "For dinner, for the distraction." "Was that all it was?" Gwendolyn asked, stepping closer. "A distraction?" The scent of her perfume, something subtle with notes of vanilla and sandalwood, mingled with the clean smell of rain-washed streets. I hadn't been this close to anyone in months, not since breaking up with my network-approved boyfriend who'd been more interested in visibility than connection. When her lips met mine, it wasn't tentative or questioning. Her kiss held the same directness as her gaze, confident yet gentle. Her hand slipped to the nape of my neck, fingers threading through my hair as the world narrowed to the warm press of her mouth against mine, the faint taste of spice from dinner lingering between us. I pulled away first, breathless and confused, my hands somehow having found their way to her waist. I started, then stopped, unsure what I was trying to deny. I know, she smiled, thumb brushing across my lower lip. You don't do this either. As I drove home alone, lights blurring through my windshield, I kept touching my lips, wondering how a day that began with professional devastation had somehow ended with the most honest connection I'd felt in years. My phone alarm blared at 5 a.m. out of habit before I remembered I no longer had a morning show to host. Rain lashed against my bedroom window as I silenced it, rolling onto my back to stare at the ceiling. 3 text messages waited on my phone, all from Gwendolyn, sent at 2 a.m. after her shift ended. Still thinking about tonight. Would love to show you some of my photography, no pressure. The second message contained an address in Church Hill and a suggestion for Saturday. The third was simpler, hope you're sleeping better than I am. I found myself smiling at the screen in my darkened bedroom, an unfamiliar warmth spreading through me. After a lifetime of carefully calculated relationships, network-approved dates with men who looked good beside me in publicity photos, Gwendolyn's straightforwardness was both terrifying and exhilarating. By Saturday, the storm had settled into a steady drizzle that gave Richmond's historic buildings a melancholy beauty. I parked outside the address Gwendolyn had sent, an old tobacco warehouse converted into artists' lofts, its brick facade weathered and imposing. You came, she said, swinging open the heavy door. Her hair was down today, copper waves falling past her shoulders, and she wore faded jeans with a paint-splattered sweatshirt. The contrast to her waitress uniform was striking. I brought breakfast, I replied, holding up a bag from a local bakery. Though I wasn't sure what time photographers consider breakfast. Any time is breakfast time when someone else brings pastries. Her loft was exactly what I'd expected. Exposed brick walls, massive windows partially covered with black cloths, and photography equipment scattered everywhere. What surprised me were the photographs themselves. Massive prints hung from wires strung across the ceiling, images of abandoned buildings captured in a way that made them seem alive rather than forgotten. These are. I stopped, searching for a word beyond the standard compliments I'd offered to countless guests on my show. Expensive to produce, she finished with a self-deprecating laugh. Hence the double shifts at Orlando's. We spent hours exploring Richmond's abandoned places through her camera lenses. She had a talent for finding beauty in decay. An old flour mill with sunlight streaming through collapsed roofing. The former psychiatric hospital with peeling paint that somehow resembled abstract art. A derelict theater where she'd captured the ghost-like projection of light against crumbling walls. Why these places? I asked, accepting the coffee she handed me from a chipped mug. She sat cross-legged on her worn sofa, suddenly serious. Because everyone's always looking for the perfect, the pristine. They miss how beautiful things can be when they're broken. Her eyes met mine. The most interesting stories come from imperfection. The rain intensified outside, drumming against the massive windows as she asked about my past, not my television career, but the parts that had come before. I found myself telling her about growing up with ambitious parents who measured success in airtime minutes, about the broadcasting degree I'd earned while secretly wanting to study photojournalism, about the relationships I'd maintained for appearance rather than connection. Was any of it real? She asked quietly. The question hit harder than I expected. My stories were, the people I covered, their lives were real. Her hand found mine, fingers intertwining. And now? Now I'm terrified, I admitted. 3 days without a camera pointed at my face, and I'm already questioning who I am without it. When Gwendolyn picked up her camera, I stiffened automatically, years of media training kicking in, shoulders back, chin slightly down, smile ready. Don't, she said. Just be whoever you are right now. The shutter clicked, capturing me unguarded, uncertain, and somehow more myself than I'd been in years. The downpour eventually stopped, leaving us restless. Gwendolyn suggested we take her prized possession, a film camera she'd rescued from a pawn shop, to capture the city post-rain. We wandered the cobblestone streets, taking turns with the camera, laughing as we splashed through puddles like children. This is what I've missed, I realized aloud, as she photographed a rain-slicked alley where sunset light created rainbow reflections in oil slicks. What? Just experiencing things without thinking about how they'd play to an audience. Her responding smile was warm enough to chase away the evening chill. When her phone rang with her mother's ringtone, however, her face transformed immediately. I have to take this, she said, answering with a concerned, "Mom, everything okay?" I wandered away to give her privacy, but couldn't help overhearing fragments. "No, the insurance denied it again. Yes, I have the overtime this week. Don't worry about that." When she rejoined me, her earlier lightness had vanished. "I need to go to Virginia Commonwealth Medical Center," she explained, keys already in hand. "Mom's having a rough day." "I'll drive," I offered, noting the slight tremble in her fingers. The hospital's fluorescent harshness was a shock after our day in gentle natural light. Gwendolyn navigated the sterile corridors with practiced familiarity, nodding to nurses who clearly recognized her. Martha Harris looked nothing like her daughter, her once blonde hair now reduced to wispy strands, her thin frame nearly disappearing beneath hospital blankets. Yet the same directness lived in her blue eyes. "You're the TV lady," she said when Gwendolyn introduced us. "Gwen records your segments." "Used to," I corrected gently. "I was recently between jobs." Martha's knowing smile made it clear where Gwendolyn had inherited her perceptiveness. "Good. Now you can help my daughter carry all these camera bags. Someone needs to before she develops a permanent shoulder tilt." Despite her jokes, I couldn't miss the reality of their situation. The whiteboard in Martha's room tracked Medicat ion schedules and billing issues alongside treatment plans. While Gwendolyn helped her mother to the bathroom, I glimpsed a hospital bill on the bedside table with a number so staggering it made my stomach clench. On the drive back to Gwendolyn's loft, she remained silent, her face illuminated periodically by passing streetlights, revealing the worry she'd hidden all day. "How long has she been sick?" I finally asked. 14 months. The standard treatments failed. This experimental one is working, but..." She shook her head. "Each treatment costs more than I make in 2 months." As I parked outside her building, neither of us moved to leave the car. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement, casting ephemeral patterns across her face. "Thank you," she said finally, "for coming with me. Most people get awkward around hospitals." "I'm not most people." Her smile in the dim light was sad. "No, you're definitely not." When she kissed me goodbye, it was different from our first kiss. Slower, deeper, weighted with the day's revelations. Her hand curled against my neck, and I found myself pulling her closer, seeking connection I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Later that night, alone in my too-large apartment, I stared at the photographs we'd taken that day. In every image Gwendolyn had captured of me, I looked like a woman I hardly recognized, less polished, more authentic, somehow both vulnerable and stronger than the version I'd presented on television for years. I fell asleep wondering which version was real, and which I'd manufactured for the cameras. 2 weeks into unemployment, I'd settled into a strange new routine. Mornings once filled with teleprompters and earpieces were now spent scrolling job listings and ignoring calls from my agent, who kept pushing for auditions at competing stations. Evenings belonged to Gwendolyn. Dinners after her shifts, photography excursions, or quiet conversations in her loft while she developed prints in her makeshift bathroom darkroom. I was leaving her building one evening when a familiar black Mercedes pulled alongside the curb. The window slid down, revealing Marcus Kelly, one of Richmond's most prominent real estate developers and a frequent guest on my former show. "Ivy Powell," he called. "I've been trying to reach you." My media training kicked in, smile engaged, shoulders squared. "Marcus, what brings you to the artistic side of town?" "Looking for you, actually." "Get in. I'll drive you home." In my former life, I'd have accepted without hesitation. Marcus was influential, connected, and known for mentoring media personalities. Now I hesitated, glancing back at Gwendolyn's building. "Just for a few minutes," he pressed. "I have a proposition you'll want to hear." The Mercedes smelled of expensive leather and Marcus's signature cologne. As we cruised through Richmond's evening traffic, he commented on my temporary setback at the station, as though my firing were merely a plot twist rather than career devastation. "Their loss," he said dismissively. "Smart money knows you'll bounce back stronger." Speaking of smart money, he handed me a glossy folder embossed with elite opportunities in gold lettering. Inside were prospectuses for investment properties across Virginia. "I'm assembling a select group of investors," he explained. "Media personalities, athletes, local celebrities, people Richmond trusts." His smile was practiced, confident. 20% guaranteed returns within 6 months. I'd covered enough financial stories to recognize the red flags. Sounds too good to be true. For most people, it would be. His voice lowered conspiratorially. But I've secured inside access to development zones before the city announces them. Once those announcements hit, property values triple. The numbers in the folder were impressive. With my severance package, I could invest enough to keep myself afloat for months while job hunting. I need to think about it, I said as he pulled up to my apartment building. Don't think too long. He handed me his card. The window closes in 3 days. That night, Gwendolyn called, her voice tight with stress. Her mother's latest treatment had been delayed due to insurance complications. They needed $12,000 by the end of the month for the next round. The hospital administrator actually suggested a GoFundMe, she said, bitter humor barely masking her desperation. Because nothing says healthcare system works like begging online for life-saving medicine. Sleep eluded me that night. I kept seeing Martha's frail form in the hospital bed, Gwendolyn's exhaustion after double shifts, and the golden numbers in Marcus's prospectus promising financial salvation. By morning, I'd made my decision. I called Gwendolyn after confirming the wire transfer to Marcus's investment account. Are you free tonight? She sounded surprised. I have the late shift, but I'm free after 11. Perfect. I'll meet you at Orlando's. The restaurant was nearly empty when her shift ended. I waited at our usual corner table, nervousness fluttering in my stomach. When she appeared, still in her waitress uniform but with her copper hair freed from its work bun, my doubts momentarily receded. You're looking suspiciously cheerful for someone who just watched me spill marinara on a customer's white shirt, she said, sliding into the booth. I reached across the table, taking her hands in mine. I have something for you. Her expression when I slid the envelope across the table shifted from confusion to shock as she counted the contents. Ivy, this is $10,000. What? For your mom's treatment, I said quickly. And before you protest, it's an investment, not charity. Her eyes narrowed. Investment in what? I hesitated, then told her about Marcus's opportunity. The doubt spreading across her face made me speak faster, explaining the guaranteed returns, the exclusive investor group, the research I'd done on Marcus's past successes. Ivy, she said softly when I finally paused, you barely know me. Why would you risk your savings? The question caught me off guard. In 2 weeks, Gwendolyn had somehow become the most real thing in my life, the person who saw me, not the television personality or the networking opportunity. Because you're the first genuine thing that's happened to me in years, I admitted. And because no one should lose their mother over money. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. She leaned across the table, her lips finding mine in a kiss that contained equal parts gratitude and something deeper that neither of us had yet named. That night, in my apartment, our connection transformed from tentative exploration to passionate certainty. Her hands traced paths across my skin, as if memorizing territory. Her lips following with whispered appreciation against each newly discovered curve. In the moonlight filtering through half-closed blinds, we learned each other's bodies with increasing urgency, her fingertips drawing confessions from my lips I'd never spoken aloud. Hours later, watching her sleep beside me, red hair spilled across my white pillowcase, I fought against a strange, persistent unease. I'd made the right choice, the only choice. The doubtful voice in my head belonged to my old cautious self, the woman who calculated every risk before acting. That woman wouldn't have found Gwendolyn in the first place. My phone illuminated with a text from Marcus. Welcome aboard. First returns expected in 3 weeks. I silenced it, turning back to the woman beside me, tracing the freckles scattered across her shoulders. As she stirred, smiling sleepily before pulling me closer, I pushed away all doubts. I'd spent my entire career pretending certainty in front of cameras. Surely I could manufacture some now for myself? What I couldn't know then, watching her peaceful sleep, was that I'd just unknowingly entangled us both in something that would test every truth between us. 3 weeks passed in a haze of new routines. Without my show to anchor my days, I found myself orbiting Gwendolyn's world instead, accompanying her to hospital visits, helping organize her photography portfolio, and even picking up occasional freelance voiceover work through her artist connections. Martha's treatment proceeded on schedule thanks to my contribution, each hospital visit showing small but significant improvements in her condition. My phone rang as Gwendolyn and I were hanging photographs for a charity exhibition we'd organized at a local gallery. Marcus Kelly's name flashed on the screen. "Great news, Ivy," he announced without preamble. "Our first returns are in, 22%, even better than projected. There's a check waiting at my office whenever you'd like to collect it." My eyes met Gwendolyn's across the gallery. She'd heard enough to understand, her smile cautiously hopeful as I ended the call. "It worked?" she asked. "Better than expected." I couldn't keep the relief from my voice. "We can cover the next 3 treatments." The kiss we shared tasted of vindication and promise, witnessed only by her black and white photographs surrounding us like silent approvals. Marcus's office occupied the top floor of a gleaming tower in downtown Richmond, his receptionist recognizing me immediately from television. "Ms. Powell, Mr. Kelly said to expect you." Marcus greeted me with the confident handshake of a man accustomed to delivering good news. On his desk lay a check that represented not just a return on investment, but validation of my decision. "This is just the beginning," he said, gesturing toward a wall of framed photographs showing him with Richmond's elite, politicians, athletes, and several of my former media colleagues. "The group is impressed with your involvement. They know your reputation for thorough research." His flattery was transparent yet effective. After weeks of professional irrelevance, having my judgment valued again was intoxicating. "The next round of investment opportunities closes Friday," he continued, sliding another glossy folder toward me. "Minimum entry is 20,000, but for you, I could accept 15 with the understanding you'll bring in additional investors from your network." The numbers in the new prospectus made my initial investment seem minuscule. "I'll think about it," I promised, though we both knew I was already calculating how much of my remaining savings I could access. That evening, amidst the elegant chaos of the gallery opening, I watched Gwendolyn flourish. She moved confidently among Richmond's art patrons, explaining her photographs with passionate precision, her copper hair catching the gallery lights like a beacon. Several pieces already displayed small red sold dots, each sale brightening her smile further. "Your girlfriend is incredibly talented," remarked Samantha Wright, my former producer, appearing beside me with champagne flutes in hand. "She's not," I began automatically, then stopped. What exactly was Gwendolyn to me? The word girlfriend seemed simultaneously insufficient and premature. "Yes, she is," I finished instead, accepting the offered champagne. Samantha studied me over the rim of her glass. "You're different, Ivy. Less." She searched for the right word. "Curated." Before I could respond, Gwendolyn approached, slipping her arm around my waist with casual intimacy. "The hospital administrator just purchased the abandoned theater series," she announced, cheeks flushed with excitement, "for his new oncology wing." Her joy was infectious, and I found myself drawing her closer, pressing a congratulatory kiss against her lips without considering who might be watching. When I remembered Samantha's presence, I turned to find her observing us with thoughtful interest. "I'd love to feature Gwendolyn's work on the weekend segment," she said casually. "Human interest pieces are performing well right now." The implication was clear. This could be my pathway back to broadcasting. Gwendolyn must have sensed my sudden tension. Her hand tightened slightly against my waist. "I'm not sure mixing business and personal," I began. "It's a good opportunity," Gwendolyn interrupted, surprising me. "Your audience would appreciate real art for a change." Later that night, as we hung the last unsold photographs in her loft, I questioned her enthusiasm. "I thought you'd be more hesitant about television exposure." She secured a frame before turning to me. "I grew up watching my mother struggle to afford her artwork. I'm practical enough to recognize opportunity." Her expression softened. "Besides, I'm not afraid of people knowing I'm with you." The words warmed me more than I expected. We'd been carefully dancing around definitions, our connection evolving organically without the labels I'd always insisted upon in previous relationships. "About that," I said, taking her hand. "Samantha called you my girlfriend." Gwendolyn's eyebrow arched. "Did she? And what did the famous Ivy Powell say to that?" I said yes. The simplicity of my answer surprised even me. "Is that accurate?" Her response was to draw me closer, her kiss tasting of champagne and certainty. "I believe the technical term is obviously," she murmured against my lips. Morning found us tangled in her sheets, sunlight filtering through the partially covered windows of her loft, casting striped patterns across our intertwined bodies. The quiet contentment I felt watching her sleep was unfamiliar, a peaceful certainty I'd never experienced in any previous relationship. My phone vibrated with a text from Marcus. Decision by Friday, several investors are waiting on your lead. Gwendolyn stirred beside me. Work already? She asked sleepily. I set the phone aside, pulling her closer. Nothing that can't wait. What I didn't tell her was that I'd already decided to invest again, doubling down on my commitment to Marcus's venture. The initial success had quieted my doubts, and Martha's improving health seemed like cosmic validation. How could something that brought such tangible good possibly be wrong? It was a question I would soon have devastating cause to revisit. The manila envelope arrived without a return address, sliding under my apartment door like a serpent seeking warmth. I might have ignored it among the stack of bills and sympathy cards from former viewers, but my name was typed with unsettling precision. Not Ivy Powell, but Ivy Elizabeth Powell. My never-used middle name reserved for legal documents and my mother's rare expressions of disappointment. Inside was a dossier that made my blood run cold, photographs of Marcus meeting with known fraudsters, bank statements showing suspicious transfers, and newspaper clippings about investment schemes across state lines. A yellow sticky note carried a simple message: not his first scam, get out while you can. I spent the day verifying what I could through media contacts and online research. By evening, doubt had crystallized into dread. I called Marcus repeatedly, each attempt diverted to voicemail. My text messages went unanswered, each passing hour heightening my anxiety. You look terrible, Gwendolyn said when she arrived that night, her hands still faintly smelling of darkroom chemicals. What's wrong? I hesitated, the dossier heavy in my hands. We'd just celebrated Martha's positive response to treatment, her doctors cautiously optimistic about her prognosis. The money from my investment with Marcus had made that possible. How could I tell Gwendolyn I'd potentially entangled us in fraud? Work stress, I lied, setting the envelope aside. Samantha wants me back for a trial segment next week. She didn't believe me. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't press. Instead, she produced a bottle of wine and takeout from Orlando's. Celebration dinner, she explained. The gallery sold 3 more prints today. I forced enthusiasm I couldn't feel, the food turning to ash in my mouth as guilt churned my stomach. Every time Gwendolyn mentioned her mother's improvement, the knot in my chest tightened. I needed answers from Marcus before I could burden her with this potential catastrophe. My opportunity came 2 days later. Orlando's was hosting a charity dinner for local businesses, and Marcus's development company had reserved a prime table. I convinced Samantha to get me in as media coverage, promising exclusive content for her weekend segment. The restaurant transformed for the event: white tablecloths, crystal glassware, and Richmond's business elite in formal attire. Gwendolyn worked the floor in a crisp black uniform, professional smile firmly in place though her eyes softened whenever they met mine across the room. Marcus arrived fashionably late, surrounded by the usual entourage of admirers and business associates. When he spotted me setting up near the bar, his smile flickered momentarily before broadening with practiced charm. Ivy Powell, returning to the media spotlight, he greeted, signal hand behind his back clearly warning his associates to give us privacy. Have you reconsidered my offer? I've been trying to reach you for days, I replied, keeping my voice low. We need to talk, privately. His eyes hardened, though his smile remained fixed. Nothing to discuss that can't be said here. The investment group is thrilled with our progress. I withdrew a folded page from the dossier, sliding it across the bar. Is this progress? Because it looks like the same scheme you ran in Charlotte 3 years ago. The transformation was subtle but immediate, his posture stiffening, the warmth in his eyes extinguished. Careful, Ivy. Journalists can be sued for defamation. I'm not a journalist tonight, I replied, voice trembling slightly. I'm an investor questioning where my money really went. His laugh was dismissive, meant for any observers watching our exchange. Your money is precisely where it should be, multiplying nicely. Don't let anonymous tips from competitors rattle you. So explain the shell companies, and the complaints filed against. Ms. Powell, he interrupted, voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You trusted me with your money because you needed it. For what was it again? Oh yes, your girlfriend's mother's treatments. His smile turned predatory. How devastating if that funding were suddenly withdrawn due to an investor's unnecessary panic. The threat landed with precision, stealing my breath. Before I could respond, we were interrupted by a crash of breaking glass. Across the room, Gwendolyn stood frozen, a shattered wine bottle at her feet, red liquid spreading like blood across the polished floor. Her eyes met mine, wide with shock. She'd been passing directly behind Marcus, close enough to hear every word. The restaurant manager rushed over, concern for his waitress overriding irritation at the disruption. "Gwen, are you okay?" "Fine," she managed, eyes never leaving mine as Marcus slipped away in the confusion. "Just clumsy." Later, in the restaurant's back alley, Gwendolyn confronted me, still in her wine-splattered uniform. "Tell me he was lying," she demanded, voice tight. "Tell me you didn't knowingly get involved in something illegal to pay for Mom's treatments." "It's not what you think," I began, reaching for her. She stepped back. "What exactly did you invest in, Ivy? And don't lie to me." I told her everything, the original investment, the anonymous dossier, my growing suspicions. "I thought I was helping," I finished lamely. "By gambling with dirty money? Money that could disappear any moment?" Her voice cracked. "Mom's next treatment is scheduled for Tuesday. If that money's gone..." "It won't be," I promised desperately. "I'll make this right." Her laugh was bitter, tears finally spilling over. "My whole life I've watched people take shortcuts that end up costing more. I thought you were different." "I am different. I did it for you, for your mother." "No." The word fell between us like a stone. "You did it to be the hero, to solve the problem quickly instead of living through the mess with me." She was right, and the realization stung worse than any criticism I'd received in my professional life. I had wanted to be the savior, to prove my worth now that I no longer had my career to define me. "Gwen?" I reached for her again. This time she didn't pull away. Instead, she stepped forward, her kiss desperate and salt-tinged with tears. It felt like an ending, not a reconciliation. "Fix this," she whispered against my lips before stepping back. "Not for me, not for my mother, but because it's the right thing to do." She walked back into the restaurant, shoulders straight despite the weight of my revelation. I remained in the alley, rain beginning to fall, a gentle Richmond drizzle that couldn't possibly wash away what I'd done. My phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "Federal investigation into Marcus Kelly begins Monday. Last chance to cooperate. Meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m., Jefferson Hotel lobby." I stared at the screen, rain soaking through my clothes, understanding that whatever choice I made now would irrevocably alter both our lives. The Jefferson Hotel lobby exuded old-world elegance, marble floors, sweeping staircases, and the watchful eyes of Richmond's painted ancestors. I'd interviewed countless celebrities here, always feeling at home among the luxury. Today, my heels clicked too loudly on the polished floor, each step broadcasting my anxiety as I searched for my mysterious contact. "Miss Powell." A woman in a nondescript pantsuit approached, her handshake firm. "Agent Diana Mercer, Financial Crimes Division. Thank you for coming." She led me to a secluded alcove where a man in a similar suit waited. "This is Agent Thompson. We believe you have information about Marcus Kelly's investment scheme." I'd expected to feel intimidation, perhaps even fear. Instead, a strange relief washed over me, the burden of my secret finally shared with people who might help untangle it. "I invested $50,000, I admitted, voice steadier than I expected. Initially 15, then 35 more after the first returns came in." Agent Mercer nodded. "Those returns weren't real, just enough of your own money returned to encourage larger investments." "Classic Ponzi structure," Thompson added. "Kelly's running the same scheme in 3 states using different company names. You're far from his only victim." The word victim landed uncomfortably. I'd been foolish, desperate to solve Gwendolyn's problems with a quick fix. Victim felt too passive for my active mistake. "What happens now?" I asked. "We need your help gathering evidence," Mercer explained. "Kelly trusts you. As a former media personality, you bring credibility to his operation." The implication was clear. They wanted me to wear a wire, to extract incriminating statements from Marcus. The thought made my stomach knot. What about the money? People have medical treatments depending on those funds. Thompson's expression softened slightly. "We're building a case for asset recovery, but that takes time. Healthcare expenses will be prioritized in victim restitution." Time. The one thing Martha Harris didn't have. I left the meeting with a business card and 24 hours to decide. The weight of that decision followed me to Virginia Commonwealth Medical Center, where I found Gwendolyn in the cafeteria during her break from sitting with her mother. She looked up from her coffee, eyes red-rimmed from crying or lack of sleep, perhaps both. The distance between us felt greater than the few feet of linoleum floor. "The federal agents reached out," I said quietly, sliding into the chair across from her. "They want my help building a case against Marcus." "And Martha's treatment money?" "Frozen during investigation, possibly recoverable eventually." Gwendolyn closed her eyes briefly. Eventually. What a beautifully useless word. A doctor approached our table, face grim. "Gwendolyn, your mother's numbers are dropping again. We need to make decisions about the next steps." The ensuing hours passed in a blur of medical consultations and terrible choices. Without the next treatment, Martha's cancer would likely progress rapidly. The alternative experimental protocols required immediate, substantial deposits the hospital wouldn't defer. I stood helplessly beside Gwendolyn as she absorbed these realities, her hand cold in mine despite the overheated hospital corridors. When she finally spoke, her voice was hollow. "Mom says to stop fighting so hard, to accept what's coming." "And what do you say?" I asked gently. Her eyes met mine, fierce despite their redness. "That I'm not done fighting, not for her, not for anything that matters." That night we returned to my apartment, both too exhausted for further discussion. As Gwendolyn showered, her ritual after hospital visits, washing away the scent of antiseptic and illness, I made the call to Agent Mercer. "I'll help you," I agreed quietly. "But I need something in return." By morning, we had a plan. The FBI would expedite Martha's inclusion in a medical assistance program for victims of financial crimes if I successfully gathered evidence against Marcus. All I had to do was meet him, wearing a wire, and get him to incriminate himself. What I didn't tell Gwendolyn was the risk assessment Agent Mercer had outlined. Marcus's previous associates who'd cooperated with authorities had faced professional threats, personal intimidation, and in one case, physical danger. I found Gwendolyn at her darkroom sink, methodically developing photographs from our earlier, happier days. The images emerging from chemical baths showed us laughing in rain-slicked streets, unaware of what was coming. "I found a solution," I told her. "A program that can cover your mother's treatments while the investigation proceeds." Hope flickered in her eyes. "How?" I chose my words carefully. "I just need to provide some information to the investigators, make a statement." She studied me with the same perceptiveness that had first drawn me to her. "There's more you're not saying." Rather than answer directly, I reached for her, pulling her against me despite the chemical smell of developer on her hands. For a moment she resisted, then melted into me, her body remembering what her mind still questioned. In the dim red light of her makeshift darkroom, we found each other again. Her lips traced confessions against my skin that her pride wouldn't allow her to speak aloud, her fingers rediscovering the paths that made me gasp and arch beneath her touch. We moved together with increasing urgency, as if physical connection could bridge the fractures in our trust. Afterward, tangled in sheets still damp from our exertion, I gathered courage for what needed to be said. "I'm meeting Marcus tomorrow," I admitted. "Wearing a wire." Her body tensed against mine. "That's dangerous." "It's controlled. The FBI will be monitoring." "The same FBI that allowed his previous schemes to continue for years?" She propped herself up, eyes searching mine. "These men aren't just white-collar criminals, Ivy. They protect their interests." "This is how I fix it," I insisted. "For your mother, for us. There are other ways." "Not fast enough." I touched her cheek, memorizing the constellation of freckles across her nose. "Sometimes the quickest path through is straight ahead." She kissed me then, with a desperation that spoke of fear rather than desire. "Promise me you'll be careful." "I promise." What I didn't say was that promises, like investments, sometimes fail despite our best intentions. The wire itched against my skin, hidden beneath a silk blouse I'd worn countless times on television. Agent Mercer had secured it with medical tape, her touch clinical as she explained the technology once more. "The microphone activates when you press this button," she demonstrated on a small device disguised as a lipstick. "Backup recording happens continuously, but pressing this signals us that you've obtained something significant. Her eyes met mine, unexpectedly gentle. Remember, your safety comes first. If at any point you feel threatened, use the panic phrase, "I should check the stock market today." We'll extract you immediately. A black surveillance van waited 3 blocks from the cafe where I'd arranged to meet Marcus. Inside, Agent Thompson monitored equipment that would capture every word of my conversation. Gwendolyn sat beside him, having insisted on being present despite both agents' objections. "She's my responsibility," she told them firmly. "If something goes wrong, I need to be there." Watching her now through the van's tinted window, her expression tight with worry, I felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just about righting my mistake or helping her mother. It was about being worthy of the trust I'd broken. "Signal check," Agent Thompson said through my nearly invisible earpiece. "We're live." Marcus had chosen an upscale cafe with outdoor seating, public enough to discourage confrontation, private enough for sensitive conversation. He was already waiting when I arrived, sunglasses masking his expression as he sipped an espresso. "Ivy," he greeted coolly, "I was surprised to hear from you after our miscommunication. That's why I wanted to meet." I settled into the chair across from him, heart hammering against the wire taped to my ribs. "I've been thinking about increasing my investment." His eyebrow arched above his sunglasses. "Have you now? What changed?" I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "My girlfriend's mother is getting worse. The treatments are working, but they're getting more expensive. I need larger returns." "And the concerns you raised at the charity dinner?" "Panic," I admitted convincingly. "Someone's trying to sabotage you and by extension me. But I've done more research. The complaints were dismissed. The shell companies explained." Marcus removed his sunglasses, studying me with calculated intensity. "You've always been smarter than most of my investors, Ivy. It's why I valued your participation." "Then let's talk numbers," I pressed. "I have another 40,000 available. How quickly can we see returns?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "First, let's address your recent meeting at the Jefferson Hotel." My blood froze. Through my earpiece, I heard Thompson's sharp intake of breath. "Stay calm," Mercer's voice instructed. "He's fishing." "I had breakfast with my agent," I lied smoothly. "She's pushing for a return to television." Marcus reached into his jacket, producing several photographs. He laid them carefully on the table, facing me, images of me entering the hotel, speaking with agents Mercer and Thompson. "Your agent seems to have a government ID," he observed dryly. "Financial Crimes Division, if my sources are correct." In the surveillance van, I knew alarms would be sounding. My cover was blown. The smart play would be to use the panic phrase immediately. Instead, I found myself reaching for the images with steady hands. "You're having me followed?" "I protect my investments," he replied simply. "All of them." "Then you should know I'm not your only investor talking to federal agents," I countered, improvising desperately. "They're reaching out to everyone." "I wanted to warn you." His expression shifted subtly, calculation replacing certainty. "Is that so? Why do you think I'm here?" "I'm offering you information in exchange for priority on returns." I leaned closer, voice dropping. "They're building a case. But they don't have anything solid yet. Just rumors, accusations. And what do they want from you?" His eyes never left mine, searching for deception. "Confirmation about the Charlotte investments, records of transfers, evidence your returns aren't legitimate." The wire itched against my skin, capturing every word as Marcus's expression darkened. "Those returns are absolutely legitimate," he insisted, lowering his voice. "The Charlotte situation was different. Regulatory complications necessitated certain structural adjustments. Adjustments that looked like fraud?" His laugh was brittle. "The line between innovative finance and technical violations is absurdly thin these days. Yes, funds were moved between investor accounts temporarily. Yes, some early returns came from newer investments rather than actual profits. But the end game was always legitimate." My heart raced. He was incriminating himself, providing exactly what the agents needed. I subtly pressed the button on my fake lipstick. "So if the FBI obtained your financial records," I began. "They won't find what they expect," he finished confidently. "The transactions are structured through offshore entities, By the time they unravel it all, the Richmond Development Zone announcement will be public, property values will triple as anticipated, and everyone gets paid exactly as promised. I pressed the lipstick button again, signaling the second admission. Except in Charlotte, I noted. Those investors lost everything. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. A regrettable necessity. The market shifted unexpectedly. As he spoke, I noticed a flicker of movement beyond his shoulder, a reflection in the cafe window of someone watching us intently from a parked car. "We need to wrap this up," Thompson's voice urged in my earpiece. "He's got backup." Before I could respond, Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then back at me with newfound suspicion. "You're wearing a wire," he stated flatly. "I should check the stock market today," I said immediately, the panic phrase slipping from my lips. Marcus stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. "You've made a serious mistake, Ivy." Two men emerged from the parked car, moving purposefully toward our table. Through my earpiece, I heard commotion in the surveillance van, agents mobilizing, Gwendolyn's voice raised in alarm. I stood to leave, but Marcus gripped my wrist. "We're not finished." "Let go of me," I demanded, loudly enough to draw attention from nearby diners. "You have no idea what you've done," he hissed. "Your girlfriend's mother's treatment, your little photography business, all of it disappears when I'm arrested." The approaching men were 20 feet away when a blur of copper-red hair entered my peripheral vision. Gwendolyn had left the van, rushing toward our table with reckless determination. "Ivy!" she called, ignoring the agents shouting for her to stop. What happened next unfolded in heartbeats. Marcus released my wrist as his associates reached us. Gwendolyn inserted herself between us, eyes blazing with protective fury. Agent Mercer emerged from a nearby shop, hand inside her jacket reaching for her weapon. "Federal agents," Thompson shouted from behind us. "Everyone stay where you are." In the chaos, my eyes met Gwendolyn's. Fear and love mingled in her blue gaze as she reached for my hand. 6 months can transform everything. The Richmond courthouse steps, bathed in autumn sunlight, looked nothing like the rain-slicked streets where Gwendolyn and I had first connected. Yet, as I waited outside the imposing building, memories of those early days flooded back. The vintage camera shop, our first kiss under streetlights, the countless photographs capturing moments we thought would last forever. "Miss Powell?" A court aide approached. "They're ready for your testimony." Inside, Marcus Kelly sat beside his attorney, his once immaculate appearance now rumpled after months in custody. The evidence gathered from our recorded conversation, combined with financial records seized during the subsequent investigation, had unraveled his operation across 3 states. My testimony today would be the final piece securing his conviction. As I walked to the witness stand, I caught a glimpse of copper hair in the gallery, Gwendolyn, arriving just in time, slipping into a back row seat. Our eyes met briefly, her small nod giving me strength as I raised my hand to be sworn in. The testimony itself passed in a blur of precise questions and careful answers. Yes, I had invested funds. Yes, Marcus had explicitly admitted to using new investments to pay earlier investors. Yes, he had threatened retaliation when confronted. When it was over, I stepped down from the witness stand feeling lighter than I had in months. Outside in the courthouse corridor, Agent Mercer approached with a rare smile. "Well done. The prosecutor believes we have more than enough for a conviction," she said, handing me a business card. "This is the contact for the victim restitution program. They're expediting cases with medical needs." I tucked the card away, though we no longer needed it. After the FBI raid, community support had materialized in unexpected ways. A local news station, not my former employer, had run a feature on Martha's struggle, prompting an anonymous donor to cover her remaining treatments. The experimental protocol was working. Her latest scans showed significant improvement. Gwendolyn emerged from the courtroom, the fluorescent lights catching the gold flecks in her blue eyes. We'd weathered the crisis together, but rebuilding trust was slower work than breaking it had been. "You did great," she said simply, reaching for my hand. "It's finally over," I replied, lacing my fingers through hers. Outside, Richmond's fall air carried the scent of nearby bakeries and fallen leaves. We walked in comfortable silence toward the car, our footsteps synchronized from months of finding our way back to each other. "Mom's asking when you're coming for dinner again," Gwendolyn said as we drove away from the courthouse. She's trying a new soup recipe she claims will put meat back on your bones. I laughed, tension dissipating. Tell her Sunday works and I'll bring dessert. Martha's recovery had been the miracle we needed, not just for her health, but for us. Her forgiveness had come easier than either of us expected, her wisdom cutting through our complicated guilt and recriminations. Life's too short for blame games, she'd told us during a hospital visit, her frail hand gripping both of ours with surprising strength. You two made mistakes trying to help me. Now help each other instead. We'd taken her advice, slowly rebuilding what had fractured. Some nights still found us awake at 3 a.m., having difficult conversations about trust, forgiveness, and the future. Other nights, we rediscovered each other with an intensity born from nearly losing everything. I have something to show you, Gwendolyn said, turning onto a street in Richmond's Arts District. She parked outside a renovated storefront with large windows and a fresh coat of deep blue paint. What is this? I asked, following her to the door. She unlocked it with a flourish, revealing a bright, open space. Photography equipment occupied one half, while the other featured cafe tables, a small counter, and a glass display case. Welcome to Double Exposure, she announced proudly. Part gallery, part cafe, all ours if you want it to be. I walked through the space in amazement, noting the professional lighting tracks installed for exhibitions, the gleaming espresso machine, and the carefully designed floor plan that would allow both businesses to operate harmoniously. How did you... The money from my hospital exhibition sales, plus a small business grant, Gwendolyn explained. And that network producer who featured my work offered to invest, said Richmond needs more creative spaces. In the center of the main wall hung a photograph I recognized, the Polaroid Gwendolyn had taken of me that first rainy day in the camera shop, my makeup smeared, hair damp, expression vulnerable and authentic. Beneath it sat a glass display case containing the vintage Rolleiflex we had both reached for simultaneously all those months ago. I bought it yesterday, she said, following my gaze to the camera. Figured it deserved to be here, where it all started. My throat tightened with emotion. Gwen, this is incredible, but I can't accept. You're not accepting anything, she interrupted. You're joining something. My photography, your media expertise, partners. The word hung between us, carrying multiple meanings. Partners, I repeated softly, drawing her into my arms. Her lips found mine in a kiss that felt both familiar and new, a continuation and a beginning. When we separated, her eyes held the same directness that had first drawn me to her. I love you, she said simply. Through fraud investigations, hospital stays, and whatever comes next. Outside the window, Richmond continued its afternoon bustle, people hurrying past unaware that inside this blue storefront, my world had once again transformed completely. I love you too, I whispered against her hair, breathing in the faint scent of darkroom chemicals that had become more like home than any television studio ever was. That evening, as we christened our new space with takeout dinner among unpacked boxes, I watched Gwendolyn explaining her vision for our first exhibition. Her hands moved animatedly, copper hair catching the light, eyes bright with passion and possibility. I realized then what the vintage camera had captured from the beginning, that sometimes life's most perfect focus comes only after everything has been thoroughly shaken out of frame.